They took him off. And they took him off because the owner said, take him off. I don't want that guy.
They pulled him off. And they did it because the owner said so. Take him off. I don't want that guy. That's the bombshell hanging over this entire story. On the 18th of August, 2025, fans were floored when the Browns named Joe Flacco as their Week 1 starter instead of Shedeur Sanders. But now the NFL itself has stepped in.
It was the slide seen round the world, round after round. All eyes were on Shedeur Sanders, whose name was never called until the 5th round of the NFL draft Saturday, when the Cleveland Browns made Sanders the second quarterback they'd draft over the weekend.
League executives confronted the Browns owner and demanded Sanders get his shot. The owner's answer? It stunned everyone. This isn't just about a depth chart. It's about a draft day collapse, a storm of conspiracy, and the league's image hanging in the balance.
And I'm going to tell you, I spent a large amount of the last 24 hours thinking about nothing more than I was thinking about collusion. Because how in the hell does 32 teams in the National Football League pass on a quarterback that was universally recognized as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country entering this draft, and 32 teams passed on him?
To understand why Sanders is at the center of all this chaos, you have to rewind to the 2025 NFL Draft, a night that will go down as one of the ugliest showcases of backroom politics football has ever seen. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just good, he was great. Over 4,100 passing yards in 2024, 37 touchdowns, a 74% completion rate.
This guy was considered one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft, and 143 picks came and went before you heard his name. Don't talk to me about football. I don't want to hear a damn thing about football. This ain't about football. This is about something else.
By every account, he was a top 3 quarterback prospect, the kind of talent teams fight for in the first round. Instead, he sat and watched, round after round, pick after pick. Behind the scenes, sources claimed Commissioner Roger Goodell himself picked up the phone during the draft, calling Browns owner Jimmy Haslam. The league couldn't afford the optics of Shedeur Sanders, Deion's son, a star quarterback, a black athlete with massive public backing, going undrafted. By the 4th round, Twitter was on fire. Analysts were furious, and Goodell allegedly made it clear this cannot happen. Sanders has to be drafted. So Cleveland grabbed him, but the Browns' own owner later admitted he wasn't even on board. If you'd told me Friday night we were taking Shedeur, Haslam said, I'd have said no way. He pinned the pick entirely on GM Andrew Berry. That wasn't just tossing your GM under the bus. That was backing up, running him over twice, and pretending the league's fingerprints weren't all over the pick. The drama didn't stop there. Cleveland had already drafted Dillon Gabriel, a mid-round quarterback prospect, just 50 picks earlier. Then they added Sanders on top of Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, and Kenny Pickett. 5 quarterbacks in one room. That's not strategy, that's chaos. And when you realize 2 separate front office meetings were held specifically about Sanders on draft day, it's clear this wasn't a normal 5th round selection. This was league pressure versus owner resistance.
It's one thing if the GM has the absolute call and he walks into the room and it's time to make the pick at 144 and he says...
There's no meeting and we just say, I want this guy.
2 meetings. Right. What do you think the meetings were about? Consider the contact.
Training camp only fueled the conspiracy theories. Sanders was barely getting first-team reps. Reports surfaced that he was throwing to equipment staff during drills. Stephen A. Smith blasted the Browns, accusing them of setting him up to fail. How does every single team pass on one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country? This isn't about football, Smith thundered. Then came his preseason debut. Sanders looked sharp, 14 completions on 23 attempts, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. LeBron James praised him. ESPN analysts lit up Twitter. And then, almost overnight, he was shelved with an oblique injury. The timing? Too convenient for fans to believe. A rookie turning heads suddenly pushed back into the shadows.
Okay, if this guy's coming in and he's not that guy, if he's going to be maybe a backup quarterbacks are obscure. They're not guys that's in the forefront. And so if you're a team Do you want a guy that's going to come in with all the celebrity, everything that comes with Shedeur Sanders?
Despite his draft position, Sanders instantly became the NFL's highest-earning rookie in endorsements, over $10 million projected for 2025. His jersey sales led the entire class. The Browns had on their roster a player they didn't want, who was also their most valuable brand asset. That contradiction made their treatment of him even more suspect. Sanders himself wasn't staying quiet. After his preseason debut, he confronted Cleveland reporter Tony Grossi directly. "What did I do to you?" he asked, calling out years of negative coverage. Some fans loved it, others saw immaturity. Either way, it added fuel to a firestorm that wasn't going away. The conspiracy angle only grew louder. Antonio Brown went on record claiming NFL owners had a secret pact not to draft Sanders, that Haslam broke the deal only after Goodell leaned on him. Then Boomer Esiason dropped his own bombshell, saying he spoke to people inside 3 organizations who admitted their owners instructed scouts, take him off the board. I don't want that guy. Identical wording, identical outcome. That doesn't happen by coincidence. That sounds like coordination. The racial undertones were impossible to ignore. Fans pointed out that Eli Manning essentially refused to play for San Diego in 2004 and still went first overall. Shedeur and his father voiced preferences, and suddenly he's entitled and uncoachable? A Colorado fan even filed a $100 million lawsuit against the NFL, accusing the league of racial discrimination and citing a leaked arbitration report that allegedly detailed collusion against black quarterbacks. The case is ongoing, but the optics alone are devastating. Dr. Umar Johnson called for Deion Sanders to sue for $40 million, arguing the NFL deliberately punished his son to send a message. Others compared the ordeal directly to Colin Kaepernick, framing Shedeur's slide as another instance of systemic blackballing, only this time the league scrambled to cover itself before it got too obvious. Of course, there were skeptics. Chris Carter said collusion claims were overblown, that Shedeur hurt himself by skipping the combine, bombing interviews, and coming off arrogant. But even Carter admitted the slide was unprecedented. Bad interviews don't usually push a top 3 quarterback into the 5th round, not when teams are desperate for talent, not when lesser prospects are drafted ahead of him. Goodell eventually addressed the controversy, insisting the NFL doesn't blackball talent. But the problem was, his denial came after reports he personally pressured the Browns to draft Shedeur. Why intervene if it was just a normal draft slide? Why trade up to 144 if he wasn't valued higher internally? Every move the league made looked less like coincidence and more like damage control. And then there's Shedeur himself. His numbers at Colorado were historic, over 14,000 passing yards, 141 touchdowns, nearly 71% completions. Those are franchise quarterback numbers. But there were legitimate concerns. He skipped combine workouts. He bristled in interviews. One team reportedly tested his football IQ by planting fake plays in their defensive schemes. Dylan Gabriel caught the trick. Sanders didn't point. Instead of owning the mistake, Sanders allegedly brushed it off. That raised real questions about his preparation. Then there was the family factor. Drafting Shedeur meant drafting Deion too. Teams feared his larger-than-life presence, the cameras, the constant commentary. They worried about who would really be coaching Shedeur, the NFL staff, or his father from the sidelines. Even off the field, red flags popped up, speeding tickets, social media distractions, nearly $7 million in NIL earnings before the draft. To some teams, it looked like he was more focused on being a brand than being a quarterback. Fair or not, those perceptions piled on. Still, none of that fully explains why he lasted until pick 144. Not when his talent is undeniable, not when he proved in his very first NFL action that he could make plays at the highest level. The conspiracy theories about collusion, about a secret owner's agreement, about racial bias gain traction because the alternative explanation doesn't make sense. You don't let a quarterback that talented, that marketable, and that prepared to deliver on day one fall that far unless something bigger is happening behind the curtain. That's why the NFL is in crisis mode, because whether or not a smoking gun ever emerges, the perception is already cemented. Fans believe the league tried to bury Shedeur Sanders. Owners didn't want the attention, didn't want the father, didn't want the headaches, but the commissioner couldn't let the optics spiral into another Kaepernick situation. So the Browns got stuck as the reluctant landing spot. Now, here we are, a rookie quarterback with endorsements flooding in, jerseys flying off shelves, talent proven on the field sitting on the bench, while the team trots out 40-year-old Joe Flacco. And when the NFL leaned on the Browns owner to play him, his response said it all: "I don't want that guy." Whether this ends as a redemption story, a legal battle, or another black mark on the league's record, one thing's certain: Shedeur Sanders isn't just fighting for a roster spot. He's fighting a system that may have decided long before draft night that he didn't belong. And that fight is far from over.